Welcome back, everybody, into Bills Chat Live. I am Josh McCarty. With me tonight, as always, is Luka. Luka, anything left on your 2025 checklist to get to? Because you only have a few hours left to do it.
Nothing comes to mind, and I feel like that's probably a good thing then. Because yes, the reality is we are rapidly approaching 2026, and I laugh. It's the time of year on any social media if you're doom scrolling or whatever, and you just see some memes. That one of the ones I've been seeing is the Walking Dead one where they're sitting happily in a car, and it's like 2016 was 4 years ago, and it's like 2016 is minutes away from being 10 years ago. And it's like, oh my goodness, has time flown? And no, luckily 2025 has been a good one, has been a great one, it's been a life-changing one. And I can't think of anything else on that list that I need to get done before we enter 2026.
2016 was the last year that Sean McDermott wasn't the Bills head coach. So the last year of the playoff drought. Okay, so right off the top, I want to mention if you're in chat, we appreciate the hell out of you. We are not live. We did record this earlier in the day, so we are up to speed on what Sean McDermott, Josh Allen said after practice, but because it's New Year's Eve, to accommodate our schedules, we decided to record this. It's about 3:30 in the afternoon. So if something Bills related breaks in the next couple hours, sorry, we missed it. But what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about Bills Jets. We are not going to break down this game X's and O's. We're really going to talk about the high mark of whether the Bills should be playing their starters or not. And that's going to be quick conversation, just thoughts on pros and cons. Then Luka and I are going to dive into the two probable opponents for the Bills in the first round, which if you've played with the playoff machine, we're not going to go through all the scenarios. We assume that if you're watching Bills Chat Live on New Year's Eve, you know the scenarios. But the two probable playoff opponents for the Bills are the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New England Patriots. Luka and I are going to go through and tell you if we prefer one or the other. Is it worth it to, say, play your starters in an effort to play against Jacksonville and beat the Jets versus resting your starters and potentially playing the Patriots? But then I'm most excited about this, Luka. It's going to be a Bills Chat throwback. We're going to have a draft. For those of you that have been with us since the beginning, we are going to draft moments at Highmark Stadium. We're each going to get 3, and then we're going to see who can compile the best list, and then we'll put it out on Twitter for you to decide who has the best list. But Luka, let's start at the beginning. The Bills play the Jets this week. The topic of the week is, will the Bills play their starters? Sean McDermott, as he usually does, did not give us much information on Wednesday. Although I did think it was interesting that he said it's going to be business as usual, but did reference the lengthy injury report when factoring in decisions on who would play. So it left the door open for the Bills to play their guys. I still think, sitting here midday on December 31st, Wednesday, the most likely outcome for the Bills is to play their guys that are healthy for about a quarter and a half to 2 quarters, because I think they want to do a couple of things. I think, one, they want to extend Josh Allen's start streak, which is very important to him. They can do that with a simple handoff and get him out of the game. 2, I think they want to give James Cook as much of an opportunity as possible to get the rushing title. They will have access to what Jonathan Taylor did earlier in the day, but they also have to keep in mind that Derrick Henry is less than 200 yards away, and he can certainly get there in one game. So I think that is going to be in consideration. And 3, while this would not be my choice, I do think it's important to the Bills to find a healthy blend between keeping guys healthy and winning the last game at Highmark. So I think McDermott giving these guys a quarter to 2 quarters apiece is probably where he's going to land. How do you see it?
The last point you bring up is one that, as much as I would prefer everyone in-house to understand the business decision of everything and how important it is to just be like, hey, there is a greater focus, the vibes you're getting from conversations and, what content is coming out of the Bills, which it shouldn't be a surprise. There's a lot of farewell to the stadium. They just put out a massive video about the history of it all. It was a great watch for what it's worth. Watched it this morning even. And and you're hearing McDermott during pressers kind of acknowledge the history of everything, the stadium, the moment that will be Sunday. I'm getting the sense that we will potentially see a little bit more than the simple one snap for Josh Allen, wave to the crowd, see, unless his injury stuff is a little bit more of a concern to the point where it's like, hey, we can't be doing that, which I am in favor of still. But the remaining of the starters, you mentioned a quarter, maybe even a half. I could see that. I could see James Cook. We talked about it in our podcast. I could see James Cook being told going into the game, hey, we're going to give you the first half to get what you can chunk wise rushing to see if you can be the season long leader of rushing in this league for this 2025 season, as well as, kind of go out with a bang a little bit and help us get that win in the final game, most likely final game at Highmark Stadium, that Rich Stadium, the Ralph, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to be using all those names in this episode, just to kind of call it all out for what it is. I forecast a little bit more of starters playing, just going for it, not because you need to beat the Jets for this season, but more so to do it as a tip of the cap, and kind of, I guess it's funny saying the cap because at one point it was the nickname, the cap, tip of the cap to Highmark, and reward fans that are making their way out there for this game that is, all of intents and purposes, meaningless-ish, that, hey, this matters, this one's for you, this one's for everyone. And, as people are standing there watching this game as the last one, I imagine as someone that would be there, if I were in that stadium, Josh, I'd probably be just like during breaks looking over at the new stadium and just letting that seep in of what the moment is for you then and there, and then what it will be in the future. And it's going to be a cool moment for anyone watching or being there. That I would say the business nature of it all is still there in the back of my head, but also it would be appreciated to see McDermott, the players, and everyone involved when it comes to the product on the field acknowledge just what kind of moment this game is in the grand scheme of things for all of those that care about the Bills and have for years in, years out, have dedicated their lives to supporting this team. That I can fully understand kind of elevating the moment a little bit for them, even if there's nothing that matters truly in this game in the large picture of this season and what it will mean for the playoffs and moving forward for the remainder of the season.
I do wonder if there's a scenario out there where Allen does a token handoff and then leaves, but they still leave everybody else out there for that half. And the thought being, don't let the golden goose get hurt. And they have the excuse of him protecting the foot injury. It'll be fascinating to see how it is. I tend to be nostalgic about things. I tend to look at things, like history of things, and I respect anybody that looks at that last game as a stadium as a true moment in time. This is a team that has a real look at a Super Bowl this year. They have, in my opinion, definitively the best quarterback in the tournament, no matter who makes it from here on out. And I would not mess with any of that to try to make one last memory in this stadium. That is just me. Luka, no matter what happens on Sunday, win or lose, the most probable outcome for the Bills is they are going to be in the first round of the playoffs, traveling to New England or traveling to Jacksonville. What I will say, as I try to clear my throat, if the Bills were to rest their starters, giving themselves a higher likelihood of losing the game that they otherwise would be heavily favored to win, that would at least tip the scales a little bit closer to New England. Whereas if they go out and win the game, it's hard to find a scenario where they don't go to Jacksonville, barring something completely unforeseen. Two-part question for you as I get back into banner life.
Whoa.
One, do you have a preference between Jaguars and Patriots for first-round opponent as far as ease of game goes? And the second part of that question is the difference between those two teams enough to adjust your strategy week 18 when it comes to resting versus playing?
First part of that is definitely I tip to the Jags. I would much prefer to see this Bills team start down the path of going to Jacksonville, higher percentage of better weather condition. And as well as I just think the Jags have shown they can win big games. I mean, that one a couple of weeks ago in Denver to really, to assist them and put them in position to be where they are. It was an impressive one, but I still kind of get this paper Titan-ish vibe from them. And on top of it all, I do believe the Bills match up even better against them than a lot of the others in the tournament, we'll call it. So just feels like a good matchup, a good situation to be in, especially if you're trying to hit the ground running to make another run and you will find yourself as a road team in the wild card round that the Bills will be. Going to the Jacksonville Jaguars feels like a nice one. And also on top of it, it kind of feels like in a weird way for McDermott, you broke the drought in your first playoff game was an ugly loss at Jacksonville. And as we close out the Highmark season or the old Highmark season, you get a little bit of a redemption arc here as you go to visit those Jags once again and maybe right that wrong and make a bit of a run here with a much better quarterback at least. But the roster, you could compare however you would like to be between that team and this one. Now, with the Patriots, familiarity, things like that, there's a little bit more where eventually you may have to play them. But if I had to choose the first team you want to play, I'd prefer not to lead off with that. And then to answer your second part, no. I don't think the difference between the two varies enough where you should strategize based on results or whatever is going on as to how you want to handle this. Realistically, the only big swing is if all of a sudden you see the Titans go into Jacksonville and upset the Jags and really stir the pot all of a sudden when it comes to the potential for the Texans taking the division. And then on top of it, that introduces your 5 seed scenario, which the team is not listed in this situation. And if you have a chance at the 5 seed, which then feels like a 50% shot of playing the Steelers all of a sudden, yeah, I would probably then lean into maybe Josh Allen, is your foot at 85, 90%, or is it at 70%? Because let's ensure we at least get this win because there is the chance we could potentially be the 5 seed. That is the only outlier of that. If we are talking strictly in this reality, which is also 90%, I think the realistic scenario here. And these are the two teams. It's not enough to skew the scale. And you just kind of take it for what it is and move on with your life. That 6 seed, 7 seed, your path. Oh my goodness. Your path feels the same-ish, regardless on who your opposition is. Preference is the Jags, but in reality, I mean, I think you're okay with either side and either visitation that you're going to the Patriots, you're going to the Jags, and you'll take it for what it is and hopefully start your run with whatever the universe tells you need to start it at.
So I think I prefer going to Jacksonville too, but I echo what you're saying. Neither one of them are worth it in the sense of I'm going to decide to play extra hard to avoid going to New England. The reason why I would prefer not to go to New England first round, I would pick the Bills to win either game, especially with some of the off-field stuff going on in New England, even this week. I don't know if that'll impact Stephon Diggs or Christian Barmore's ability for the first round. In fact, I would predict it probably doesn't, but that's a distraction. I don't like the idea of playing a division rival in the first round. The fact is both of these games against the Patriots were an eyelash away from winning or losing either game. And I think you could make the argument that the better team on that day lost both matchups. So, you could make that argument, but to me, it's going to be tough in the playoffs. I certainly respect the Jaguars, but I feel like for me as a fan, I would rather first round, you're playing against Jacksonville. Okay. You're just playing a football game. You hope your team wins. It's not about, if you don't win this game, the Patriots have officially taken your spot, or Patriots are going to have bragging rights for the entire offseason. It's just a matchup against another quality AFC team. If the Jaguars happen to win it, you tip your cap and then you move on with your life. And it's probably not an endless off season of Jaguars fans hopping into our mentions every time we tweet anything about draft off season, whatever. With the Patriots, it's also like there's an extra added layer that you want to win it. And I'm not afraid of them. I kind of look forward to the opportunity of the Bills ending their season to get the last laugh, but I don't know if I need it or want it in round one. All right, Luka, I think we talked enough about that. I do think it's interesting. You do mention if the Titans were to go beat the Jaguars, because that would introduce the Texans then as a team that the Bills could play in the first round. And they would know that before they kicked off. Then I would be like, rest everybody. We don't need to be going to Houston. Deion Dawkins, sit down. Trubisky, go out there, take some knees. That would not happen. Let's see.
Take some knees.
I think at this point, we've kind of covered it all. Everybody's talking about playoff scenarios. At this point, let's just find out who they play. But the major story of the week this week, Luka, is the final game in the stadium. How big of a deal is that to you? I know it's a big deal that it's the final game in the stadium, but like, how much did you look at this game when the schedule came out? I guess even as I'm asking that, I'm thinking none of us thought this was going to be the last game. We thought it was going to be the last regular season game.
Right.
But now that we're here and the reality is facing us that the Bills will never take the field, most likely, in this stadium ever again after Sunday, what's that like emotionally for you?
It's interesting. I think I love you putting the caveat, because as you said it, I was thinking the same thing. It's like, I don't think as we looked at the schedule, as we predicted things, I mean, we had our prediction show. Neither of us expected this to be the final home game for this team overall on the season. And now that we're here and the reality has sunk in that this truly is percentage wise, in all likelihood, the final game in this stadium, it gives me vibes of kind of moving. I bought a new house recently and moved away from the one that I grew up as an adult, a young adult in. And I will tell you, I remember buying that house, my previous one, and it'll make sense in a second here, but I bought that previous one and I said, it's just going to be my 5-year home. Once I get my footing, once everything's good, things like that, I'll get a nicer home. That will be my next house. That house became my house for an 11-year stretch. And it truly was a home where I grew up. A lot of things happened in that place. You know, I got married at one point while still living at the home, so on and so forth. A lot of things happened. Moving away from that home got a little bit more emotional than I expected, because it just felt deeper to me as to the importance of it. I hadn't thought about the stadium as kind of like that home and a place that I grew up until this morning when I watched that video. And being from here and kind of growing up, that was the home of football to me. And it no longer being the stadium where I would be able to watch the Bills or any other team for that matter, because through all the awful seasons, Josh, like you would go there to watch other teams and other players. And I feel like I grew up and I was the first generation of an age where you really did focus on players a little bit more than just team results and things. And it closing up now and being the reality that there is a new stadium, the prospect was always exciting. Oh, we get a new thing, a fresh thing, a clean thing. Not being able to walk into that old concrete just bowl of a stadium and having the memories that we'll be discussing later on and thinking about the things that personally I enjoyed. I mean, my parents for a long time had season tickets. Shout out section 135, row 33, seats 1 and 2. Bill sideline, if you're on that sideline, left 35-yard line, just absolute premium seats, mind you. Watched a lot of games. It's going to hurt a little bit. I will be honest. Like it's going to feel weird. And even as someone that doesn't go to games regularly, I'm not a season ticket holder. It's well documented how I like to enjoy my football Sundays. That is still home to me when it comes to football. That is still the place I learned to love the game. That is still the team that even in their suckage, and as I supported even other teams in the NFL, I never cheated on them, and they were still that first love and still that team to me that was that stadium was where I have become the fan that I am. And it's gonna be a little bit of I'm not gonna get overly emotional, I don't think, on Sunday, but at the same time, when that final, the clock hits zeros and the reality sets in that stadium's long gone, it's gonna feel like that feeling I had when I finally locked my previous home for the final time and walked away. It's you're moving away from the home where you grew up and learned to be who you are, and now you're gonna have a new home that you have to kind of create those memories in and learn to enjoy, because that's the future that you have now. I mean, in this case, you haven't chosen to. The Pagulas and the Bills have chosen to do this for us. But in reality, as a fan, we will continue to choose to support this team, and the new Highmark will become our new home. So it's going to be a little bit of a bittersweet feeling when it comes to saying goodbye to old Highmark, the Cap, the Ralph, Rich Stadium, whatever you know it as. It's going to be a weird feeling for sure.
The memories are a real thing. And I remember the first time I was ever at the stadium, it was Ralph Wilson Stadium at the time in 2003. I don't live in Buffalo. I live in the St. Louis area. I think that's pretty well known for those who listen to the show. So I've only been there a handful of times. But in 2003, it was kind of a meaningless game between the Colts and the Bills. The Bills were bad that year. It was the last year of Greg Williams, but Peyton Manning and the Colts would go on to play in the AFC Championship game. And it was a close game. The Colts had to win it late. Thurman Thomas was in attendance that day, but I just remember being in that stadium. Just as much as I cared about the game that day, I was just looking down at the tunnel and I was like, wow, like that's where Brian Cox was walking off the field with spitting at the fans and flipping them off, or looking at the other end and thinking, holy cow, like that's where Steve Christie made the field goal in overtime of the comeback game and they held him up. And, you just start thinking about like, oh man, that's the sideline that Marv Levy stood on. And you just start thinking about all that stuff. And, you're right. You're going to get to the new stadium and you got to start making memories, and that's fine. Like that's what happens. And I think Ross Tucker said it best on WGR yesterday. Anytime you turn the page on anything in life, it's difficult, even if it's a page that you want to turn. So Luka, for old school Bills chat fans, we used to do this at the end of every show. We'd have some sort of a draft. And tonight what we're going to do is we're each going to draft 3 moments in the stadium. We're going to put the list on Twitter, Josh's list, Luka's list. We're going to see who has the best list of Rich Stadium / Highmark / Ralph Wilson / New Era Cap Stadium moments. But before we start the draft, we have to determine the draft order. And this is very old school. Luka, I have a trivia question for you.
Oh boy.
If you get it right, you get to choose if you go first. It's snake draft. So it's 1 and then 2, 3, and then 4, 5. You get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
The Bills in this stadium are 16-3 lifetime in the playoffs.
Ooh.
Can you name the 3 starting quarterbacks that beat the Bills in this stadium in the playoffs?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, 1 is Patrick Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Burrow.
Correct.
The 3rd one. Are they all modern, like recent?
Modern-ish.
Yeah.
Like
that's
what? I'll tell you this. It wasn't. It was after the Super Bowl run, the 4-year Super Bowl run. How about that?
Okay. So you're probably looking at like, what was that? Was it 96? No. I think I'm blanking on this last one. I'm trying to think of who it would be kind of at the tail end of that team.
It was Jim Kelly's last start.
Okay. Jim Kelly's last start. I'm blanking. I cannot think of the team.
Okay.
That's the problem.
Luka's a little younger than me. So for those,
I wouldn't, for what it's worth, I would have not seen this one and kind of let it store in the memory bank. I was a little too young for this.
This was the 1995 or 1996 Jacksonville Jaguars that actually, they were 2 years off of being an expansion team. They made the playoffs the last week of the season by beating the Atlanta Falcons. And then they come to Buffalo, upset the Bills. And then the next week, they go to Denver and upset maybe the best Broncos team of our lifetime. And many people thought John Elway is never going to get a ring. before ultimately losing to Bill Parcells, Drew Bledsoe, and the Patriots in the championship game. And their quarterback, you probably know by now, the most famous Jaguars quarterback. Got it?
There's a few of them. I mean, no, you just go ahead and say it because I'll accept defeat in this.
Mark Brunell.
Yeah.
So not a Hall of Famer, but if you watch football in that era, there's probably some of you that are like, Mark Brunell played for the Jaguars, because I remember him on the Commanders, Redskins, whatever you want to call it. So I get the choice. I'm going to go first.
Okay.
Because to me, there's one memory that stands out above the rest, in my opinion. And with my first pick, I'm going to take the 1990/1991 AFC Championship victory, 51-3 over the, at the time, Los Angeles Raiders. The second playoff win in that stadium. All the Bills fans in attendance got to see their Bills go to the Super Bowl for the first time. And in a game that ended 51-3, it was a 3-hour party. It was evident from about the second drive on that the Raiders had absolutely no answer for the K-gun, no-huddle offense. They weren't going to be able to do anything to keep up or keep the Bills out. I believe this game, now again, I don't know how much I was 8 years old when this game happened, so I've rewatched it. I've heard the stories. I believe the story goes that Bo Jackson got injured the week before, and it was a massive story in the league, and that might have been the injury that ended up ruining his career. So it was just Marcus Allen at that point, who was on the tail end of his career, although he'd go on to have a couple good years for Kansas City. But this Raiders team was no match for the Bills, and every Bills fan in the world left that stadium thinking they were going to win the Super Bowl, and that was compounded by what happened 3 hours later when Jeff Hostetler, the backup quarterback for the New York Giants, went on the road to San Francisco, the team of the 80s, and upset the 49ers, and the Giants went on to be in the Super Bowl, who the Bills had already beaten in the regular season. It just felt like all the stars were lining up. You weren't going to have to go through the 49ers. Ultimately, the Bills went on to lose that Super Bowl, but 51-3 in the stadium is my first pick.
It's a solid one. I mean, that I think I remember years and years ago, Josh, there was like, I think it was an ESPN thing or whatever. I remember being younger when this came out, and it was like the peak of every franchise, what it is. And it was a graph showing, a steady climb, a steady, a dip, whatever it was. And I think if I recall correctly, that was known and might still technically be the absolute peak of Bills franchise history, is 51-3, first AFC championship win there of that stretch. And that's a fair one. I mean, it feels like these first couple picks, Josh, are layups, and it's all preference. The other option, my first pick, becomes, what was the greatest comeback. I guess, is it technically not anymore? If you consider the one regular season one, it's still the greatest playoff comeback, if I recall. So, comeback against the Oilers has to be my first pick. In the stadium's history, it's a game I could not recall at all. Technically, I was born, yes, but I was not even 1 year old when this game occurred. But I feel like as Bills fans through life, it's one of those, it's not a requirement, but you just naturally find yourself watching the entire game broadcast and everything like that, where it's you get to learn what that experience must have been like at some point in time for the other individuals who were living that moment. And from there, everyone knows the game and everything like that and what led up to it. Jim Kelly, of course, not even able to play that game, and somehow Frank Reich going down as late as he did orchestrates the greatest comeback in NFL history after being the individual who orchestrated the greatest comeback in college history against the Miami Hurricanes while he was with Maryland. It's one of those things that is, I believe is the ESPN 30 for 30 about the Bills teams, that Bills team that Marv Levy even acknowledges that he said it jokingly to Reich, hey, you did this once, you can do it again. And wouldn't you know it, he actually pulls it off, even with a little bit of help and luck along the way. So in the stadium's history, when it comes to the greatest moments, I like you calling out the 91 AFC championship, the 90 AFC, the AFC championship over the Raiders. This is just the next great. And that feels like a perfect top tier, one of one each side. We split it because that is the next greatest game in this stadium's history. Has to be the 41-38 final, the greatest comeback in NFL postseason history when it comes to the Bills over the Oilers in the wild card round. I believe it was, if memory serving me right, because it was early January. So that has to be my number one pick. No, you're good.
There's some chatter going on in the background. My kids are having a lot of fun today. But before you get to your second pick, I just wanted to say there is, I think, a lot of similarities between that comeback game and this Bills team. Because that comeback game, people forget this, it wasn't a sellout. So I think after the expectations set by the Bills going to the Super Bowl in 90 and 91, getting the bye both years, being the number one seed both years, and then losing the AFC East now year 3 and having Miami win the AFC East, very similar to what we're seeing this year with New England, it was almost a letdown that we got to play round 1 of the playoffs versus getting the bye. And I think and then the fact that Jim Kelly was injured, Thurman Thomas was injured, Bruce Smith was injured. They did this with not just their backup quarterback, but backups all over the place against a very talented Houston Oilers team. I don't know if history will be kind enough to how talented that offense was with Lindell White and Warren Moon and some of the names on that offense. They had 3 very good receivers. It was one of those where the Bills got in, and because of who they were, and then Frank Reich went on to play the second round against Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh and won that game before Kelly came back for the championship game in Miami. But that team, kind of like this team, was like, okay, like they look like the teams we're used to, but they're not going to get it done. They're not talented enough. Yeah. And then they did the same thing as the teams before. I'm going to go close my door while you start talking about your second pick.
Yeah, absolutely. So my second pick, I was tossing between one or the other. And I feel like there is what appears to be the layup, but also there's a conversation piece. What I find to be ironic is the 2 games that I want to put here are, 1, against the same opposition, and 2, just provided this pure shock and joy following the result of it all that makes me believe that it has to be that one that skews it, and it's hard to decide between the 2. What I will say is this. The reason I will pick the one against this same opponent as my second pick in this is because, for one, it felt like a true end to what was that mighty reign of this divisional opponent over this team for such a long time. And 2, it might be just one of the greatest displays of football through 60 minutes that I've ever seen in my life. And if you haven't figured it out by now, my second pick is going to also be a wild card round game. And it is the perfect game against the Patriots only a few seasons ago when the Bills scored a touchdown on every single series in the game and completely dominated those pesky Patriots with a rookie, Mac Jones, under center, that as soon as Micah Hyde made one of the best interceptions you will ever see, it felt like it was game over at that moment in time. And the Bills just kept pounding them into the pavement until that game was over. And I mean, you can, until Bill Belichick ends up back in the NFL, you can basically say that that was the end of Bill Belichick in the NFL when it comes to respect as a winning coach, because winning did not come very often after that point in time. And realistically, that ended Mac Jones's career until he found a little bit of a resurgence now being on the Niners. So it's just that game, though, with the conditions, with everything that it was leading up to it, it was one of those moments where just the entirety of it all, you were in disbelief. And I called it one of the greatest displays of football for 60 minutes I ever watched. I can still remember sitting in my living room. I was not at that game, thankfully. I say that for weather purposes. I was sitting there with a couple friends, and we kept talking about how surreal it felt. And the realization after 2, 3, 4 drives of, we haven't punted the ball yet. We haven't even settled for a field goal yet. We keep scoring touchdowns. It's touchdown after touchdown. I mean, it opens up with Josh Allen even admitting it was basically a throwaway, and Dawson Knox makes an incredible catch and gets his feet in inbounds when he was just accepting defeat. And Josh Allen, I believe, is on record saying he didn't even see the touchdown happen. He then realized it was a touchdown as he looked at the sidelines and saw everyone celebrating. So that's just one of those ones that holds a little bit of an extra special feel to it to me, that I was able to enjoy it to the level that I was, and what it signified for everything. And it's just also, as great or not great as it feels, it's a little bit of a footnote, as that game, as perfect as it was, then led into what is probably the greatest football game I've ever watched, that unfortunately the Bills came up short on due to unfortunate circumstances. That if you look back on that postseason in general as a football fan, that is one of the many great games of that playoff that if we were to rank playoffs as football fans, Josh, I think the 2021 postseason would be well up there as one of the greats, because there were just so many good games. And this one happening at Highmark would be one of the reasons it's up there. Just an absolute masterclass by Josh Allen, the offense, the defense, everyone involved, dominating the Patriots and taking care of business. That it has to be my second pick. So the 2021 wildcard win over the Patriots, the perfect game in the Fitzmagic shirtless in the stands game, has to be my second pick.
Yeah, that would have been my pick too. I love the fact that it's called the perfect game, and that's in reference to Josh Allen's play in that game. But it really was the perfect game for so many other reasons. It was the perfect opponent, as you mentioned, the team that had tormented the Bills through basically all of the first decade of the 2000s, all the way up through 2018, 2019. It was against the coach, Bill Belichick, that had owned the Bills. It was classic Buffalo Bills weather, but people also forget, while the Bills had won 2 playoff games the previous year in Highmark Stadium, there was very limited fans in attendance. So because of the COVID situation, so as electric as it was when Micah Hyde bats down the ball against the Colts and they secure that first playoff win in, 20 years at that point in time, or something along those lines. And then the next week, Taron Johnson's interception against Lamar Jackson for a pick six that kind of sealed that game. You just didn't have that feel of full stadium emotions. So in a lot of ways, it felt like the first big playoff game in front of a true Buffalo crowd. So I'm with you. It was an absolute moment, and it would have been in my top 3 as well. The next one, you mentioned it. I think we're kind of thinking along the same lines here. Same opponent, different circumstance, but I'm going to the 2011 Week 3 matchup between the Bills and the Patriots. And the Bills had started off 2-0, but the big game was coming in Week 3. It was the Bills against Patriots, and it was kind of okay, Bills, we've seen you start hot before, but now you get a real test. Now you get the New England Patriots. And, since 2003, all the Bills had done is take losses against the Patriots, nonstop. When the Lawyer Malloy game, Bills win 31-0, then they go on to lose every game against the Patriots up until the point when this matchup happens in 2011. We've been beaten down by the Patriots, beaten down by Tom Brady. I remember when the schedule would come out, Luka, you would just pray that the Patriots would be week 17 at the time, hoping that one of the Patriot games would maybe be one where they're resting their starters. That was the life we lived. It wasn't about winning the division. It was about hoping you could win enough games to sneak in as a wild card team. That team just beat us over the head nonstop, but not on this day. And on this day, they started off hot. It looked like a classic Patriots beatdown where they humble the Bills, but then the Bills started battling their way back. And they got some breaks along the way, an interception that hit a player's helmet that ultimately was returned by, I believe, Drayton Florence. Fred Jackson with a big catch and run down to the 1-yard line. And then Ryan Lindell kicks the game-winning field goal. The Patriots are taking penalties on that because they're looking for any edge they can. Funny story about that game. I have NFL Sunday tickets, so do you. I have not missed a Bills game since 2002. I've seen every single Bills game. They are appointment television for me. That was my existence as a Bills fan. That was the one Sunday I was moving, and the person I was dating at the time only had that one day available to paint the house. And against everything I thought, because I had, we believed the Bills could beat the Patriots every time they came to Buffalo. It's just, it didn't happen. I was like, they could beat them today. I actually had to watch that game on, at the time, DVR. So I had everything turned off in the house. I had no radio. Anybody that was helping us paint was not allowed to have anything that had any kind of NFL scores on it. So I had no idea. The only sense I had was my sister kept getting texts. She's not a Bills fan, but people that she roots for the Bills. She's a Colts fan, but she roots for them because of me. She kept getting texts. And I was like, oh, this is about the Bills beating the Patriots, isn't it? And the way she answered, she's like, no, no. Well, then I go to drop off something at their house on the way coming back to watch the game on DVR. My nephew, who's like 3 at the time, runs to the door and she goes, go away. He's going to tell you about the Bills game. And I was like, oh. So I went back. I kind of knew at the time then, and I went back and watched it. So of course they beat the Patriots. I don't even get to watch it live. But to me, that was it's like if the playoff drought was like a big desert, there were some oasis points in there. I think hiring Rex Ryan was an oasis point. I think trading for Drew Bledsoe was an oasis point. And I do think that when you finally beat the Patriots, it felt like an oasis in the middle of a desert.
That's a great way to put it. It's a nice little caveat too there. That game, when you have Bill Belichick screaming at refs, as you mentioned, and they're trying to find an edge, and he's frustrated that he basically got outclassed by what he believes to be a massively inferior team across from him, and just cannot believe what is all taking place. It was a rare moment where you saw Belichick show emotion, show anger, just be frustrated. And, I love also the caveat of that game being where Fitzpatrick believed that was finally his moment to get his handshake from Tom Brady because he beat him, and Tom Brady walked off the field without any sort of respect for him and refused to shake his hand. And it almost feels like that moment where Fitzpatrick can have that in his back pocket and be like, I got the better of Brady once. I did it. And that's I think what all Bills fans remember to be peak of Fitz magic and all of that. And it was just a true culmination of something that's very special that I love that being the call out here as your pick in this play.
So now it gets tough. I think we've nailed the 4 obvious ones.
Yeah.
And I do think that much like we do with game balls and game checks, after we're done here, we can cycle through some quick little, hey, what about this? What about that? Stuff like that. So I'm thinking through this, and there's a lot of moments that are coming to my mind. I have a real hard time with the COVID season. Like I just do. Like I really want to pick that Baltimore Ravens game where they intercept Lamar, but there's just fans add so much to a game. And when there was only 6,000 fans in attendance, to me, it takes away from the moment, even though I was screaming for joy. I don't scream for joy thinking about the stadium at that moment. I'm just thinking about the teams.
Right.
I think about Music City Miracle, the year after they go out there and they play the Titans week 1, and it was a revenge game against them. I think about when Flutie beat the Jacksonville Jaguars at the time back in 1998, and it was like, oh man, Flutie might be for real, and the Jaguars team was undefeated at the time. That was pretty cool. He runs and jumps into Bruce Smith's arms. But I'm going to go with one that I don't know if everybody will agree with this, but it was very exciting day for me. 2003 season opener, 3 picks in a row against the Patriots. The Lawyer Malloy game.
Yeah.
Leading up to this week, the Patriots released Lawyer Malloy. They had signed Rodney Harrison in the offseason. Lawyer Malloy wanted a new contract. They weren't going to give it to him. Bill Belichick is famously known for getting rid of players a year too early and not a year too late. It was one of the defining characteristics of their dynasty. Lawyer Malloy is a free agent. The Bills had a screaming need at safety because at the time they were starting Coy Wire and Pearson Prelu, and neither one of those guys were fantastic by any means. Both better as like special teams players. And Lawyer Malloy was a Pro Bowl level player that had just won the Super Bowl the year before as a captain of the Patriots. So the Bills sign him that week and ramp him up big time to get him ready for the game. But that wasn't it. This was also an offseason where the Bills went out and signed Takeo Spikes, which the last game in 2002, the Bengals were here in a meaningless game. The fans in attendance spent the entire game chanting TKO, recruiting him to Buffalo. And he even mentioned that was something that went into his thinking when he signed with the Bills. They also went out and signed Sam Adams. They signed Jeff Posey. 2002, the Bills had an amazing offense, but the defense they couldn't stop a nosebleed. 2003, they went out and made a bunch of investments in the defense, And unfortunately, the offense then hit the skids. But week 1, the Patriots, if you remember the first year of Bledsoe in 2002, things were going well. The Bills looked like fun. And then the Patriots came to town and just throttled the Bills 38-7 and kind of put us in our place. They beat the Bills 38-24 again later in the year in Foxborough. Bledsoe had 4 interceptions, and it just felt like, okay, well, the Bills are a fun team, but they're not on this team's level. The entire offseason was about how can we catch the Patriots? Ha ha ha. Looking back on it now, we don't. But all those moves, Takeo Spikes, Jeff Posey, Sam Adams, and then the schedule comes out and it's week 1, New England. It's like, we're going to find out week 1. And it was like a 4-month pregame show for that game. And then finally, when the Lawyer Malloy factor of it becomes the icing on the cake, the Bills go out and win 31-0. And it was a beautiful day in the stadium. Sam Adams had a very famous interception return for touchdown off of Tom Brady. Takeo Spikes had 2 interceptions on the day. Lawyer Malloy had a batted ball that went into Nate Clement's hands for an interception. All the new guys showed up and did exactly what you envisioned them doing. And in a lot of ways, it felt like the start of something special. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. But it was a very fun day to be a Bills fan.
It's one. I have the SI cover of the pick six somewhere in my house. It's somewhere in storage, I imagine. I remember even in the move that I mentioned earlier in this episode, but moving house to house, I went through and, you're getting rid of a lot of stuff. And I went through this bin full of magazines and stuff that I, for whatever reason, kept from my childhood and stuff. And I remember I put aside a few, there's a few Tiger, what do you call it, magazines that with the cover and the story in it and stuff that I put aside. A lot of like mid 2000s hockey related things were put aside. I mean, I even have one framed. It's located right behind me here. But somewhere I have that SI cover somewhere that honestly I even as a child, I remember the significance of it. I remember how awesome it felt. It was just one of those cool moments that growing up, and we'll get to my third pick here, but growing up, the Bills to me were even from the point that I could remember a laughing stock. They were the butt end of a joke. They were, and you got to remember that I didn't even get in my childhood to enjoy the success of Super Bowl runs. It was just the Music City Miracle was really my first true experience, if you want to call it, of playoff heartbreak and all of that. And then, of course, as we know it now, that was the start of something truly painful that was just not even having postseason heartbreak and dealing with other laughable moments throughout the seasons that just when you have little things like that, those are the memories that as a kid, I remember going back to and being like, if it wasn't for those, Josh, I wonder if I even would have remained a Bills fan. Local team, things like that, I get it. But as I will even get into here, my heartstrings would get pulled other directions at times that it's like you needed the 2011 Patriots game. You needed the 2003 opener. You needed these little blips and moments that still kept me energized and the joy of Bills finding success, even in those small moments, to be there and remain a fan. And if it wasn't for those things, I genuinely mean this. If it wasn't for those kinds of games and moments, I don't know if I'd be sitting here as big of a Bills fan as I am now, because at the age that I am, you can only take so much. And I could fully be invested elsewhere. Like I know of others that just, they couldn't deal with it anymore. And they couldn't even find the joy in those little victories to continue going there. But I digress on that one. It's a great third pick. My third pick's going to be a personal one. This is not going to be on anyone else's list. I promise you, when we put this out for others, they're going to be like, why in the world is this game selected? I'm just going to be frank and obvious. But this game has always held a very special place to me. This is my number one. I'm just going to lay that out there. Josh, in 2004, a little team on Halloween came to play a game at Ralph Wilson Stadium wearing red and white. Josh McCown was their quarterback. And I remember as a kid being so flippin' excited for this game. Why, you might ask? because going into that season, this little old Cardinals team drafted my favorite player, watching all these Pittsburgh games, catching these unbelievable passes. One of the greatest college receivers of all time was coming to town, and it made me instantly a massive Cardinals fan. Also, because I was already kind of an Arizona State football fan, and there was a little bit of connection there. And I was like, I love these Cardinals. I love everything about them. And now they drafted my favorite player. So I get to go to this game on Halloween, and my mom, even preparing for that, made me this split shirt. The front was a Cardinal shirt. The back was a Bills shirt because I was still a Bills fan, but I loved Larry Fitzgerald. I loved this Cardinals team. I was so excited to see them. We sat in those seats I mentioned earlier, right on the aisle, things like that. And I got to finally see my favorite player. Well, if you are not aware of this game, it's one of the greatest memories ever. I finally got to see my favorite player in person. But the little additive on top that gets the little stat nerd in me going on this game. Josh, do you know the fun fact about this game with Larry Fitzgerald and everything about his career, his soon-to-be Hall of Fame career about this game? Can you have any inkling?
One of the games he didn't have a catch?
It is the only game in his entire professional career. Yeah, on 5 targets, he did not have one catch. He only got 1 rush for 4 yards. Ironically enough, my fun little self going to this game, being all excited to see his favorite player, he somehow found himself at the only game he never caught a pass. And then at that moment in time, after that week, he continued to get at least 1 reception through the remainder of his career. So just the little caveat on top is I witnessed history in being Larry Fitzgerald's only game as a professional football player where he didn't catch a pass. And the little kid in me was just so disappointed leaving that stadium that I somehow didn't get to see my favorite player catch a pass, although there were a couple good looks. But unfortunately, Josh McCown only completed 9 in total. Well, Josh McCown's Josh McCown for a reason. But that memory, and the reason I want to give it its rightful place on my list, is that truthfully was probably my favorite game I ever attended, because both teams I was so excited to watch. And, you know, you had Willis McGahee getting 30 carries on the day. Drew Bledsoe didn't need to do a lick of anything on the day because that Cardinals team, in all honesty, was atrocious. And I got to just watch 2 teams I love play with my favorite player on the field. And that, truthfully, is where my football fandom went to another level. That is where the Luka you see sitting here talking about football week in, week out, the one that's obsessed with the sport, the one that truly just loves and appreciates everything about it, that's where it was born. That is the game that I have a ticket stub for it somewhere. I wish I couldn't find that shirt. I know it exists somewhere in storage. I was going to break it out to show it. I thank my mother for bringing me to that game all the time when I think about it. And, you know, shout out her, brought me to that one because she knew how much I wanted to go to it. I didn't go to regular season games very often. That was normally reserved for both my parents. And I would always go, you know, the kids' day preseason game and stuff like that. That was one of the few regular season. Ironically enough, that season I went to 2 regular season games. Later on, we had that Steelers game the final week of the season to make the playoffs, and I was also there. Yeah, shout out to the Cardinals visiting the Bills, Halloween Day, 2004. It is the game that I credit being the fan that I am. Got to see my favorite player. I could not do this list when it comes to the memories of that stadium without having my favorite game of all time being on it. So shout out Larry Fitzgerald, shout out the Bills. Yeah, just that is where Luka, the football fan, was born.
I think that's really the coolest thing about sports, though. I mean, one of them is when you have a team in your market, sometimes it's not about the players on your team, but it's about the fact that other players from the league are going to come to your town and play in front of your stadium. I remember living in St. Louis, a very meaningless regular season game between the St. Louis Cardinals and the LA Dodgers, or maybe it was even the Braves. See, like, this is how meaningless it was. But I remember specifically it was Gary Sheffield threw me a baseball, and I'm a young kid.
Yeah.
From that moment on, and he and I locked eyes when I caught it because he wanted to make sure I caught it. From that moment on, he had a fan in me. I didn't know anything about Gary Sheffield. I mean, it could have been the backup third baseman for them. It turns out it's like a guy that was like a perennial all-star. But from that moment on, I loved Gary Sheffield. So getting a chance to see all-time great players is one of the benefits of having a stadium and a team as well. And I will say, like, while that's not a landmark game, it's not the comeback game. That game is somewhat significant in the sense of, if you remember the 2004 season, the Bills went on a massive win streak down the stretch to set up ultimately that loss that happened against the Steelers backups that Luka talked about. But that win streak started with the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
And they won 2, then they went to New England and lost, and they didn't lose again. They won, I think, 8 out of 9 before ultimately falling to the Steelers week 17. All right, Luka, I really enjoyed this trip down memory lane. Some of it was lame. We could talk about the 6-3 Browns game where Derek Anderson went like 3 of 18. You picked some doozies.
I had some winners on there.
Talk about the Monday night game with the Cowboys where the Bills lost, even though they had an 8-point lead with like 8 seconds to go. They managed to lose in regulation. There's been some heartbreak in that stadium. We know that as well. Some other ones that stood out to me, though, as far as like cool stadium moments, Rex Ryan's first game as a coach, Percy Harvin's touchdown from Tyrod Taylor. It felt like, do we actually have a quarterback and a coach?
Yeah.
It was just a neat moment. I am going to shout out the Ravens game last year where the Bills beat Lamar and the Ravens again. And then when Rasul Douglas catches the onside kick, it was like, oh my God, we're going back to the championship game. The Ravens game and the Colts game, the first year in the stadium, or the first year in 2020 when the Bills get back to the playoffs, those were cool. Any other cool moments that come to your mind?
I was going to say, you could shout out the 94 AFC Championship where they officially beat Joe Montana and the Chiefs and make history by going to their 4th straight Super Bowl. I mean, that's a special moment in its own right where absolutely no one else in the world wanted to see that team win that game. Everyone wanted Joe Montana and the Chiefs to end this Bills situation, going to Super Bowls and losing. And they go out there. You're not rooting for an injury, but they do end up injuring Joe Montana. They win that game and they make a historic 4th Super Bowl. You got to shout out that one. That's another big one. I mean,
what's funny about that game real quick is, so the Bills and Cowboys had played in the previous Super Bowl. And then the Bills and Cowboys are playing the Chiefs and Joe Montana, like you mentioned. And the Cowboys are playing the Niners. The world wanted Joe Montana against the Niners.
Yes.
But yet they got a rematch. Come on, people.
It's a really funny kind of footnote to that one. I mean, another one, honestly, is, to me, if it's kind of minimal, but in 2019, when they beat the Broncos in November and they went to 8-3, and you're like, holy shit, we have potentially a fun quarterback who's improving off of his rookie season. And now you're 8-3, and it's like playoffs are becoming a reality once again. You had the drought break, and then all of a sudden you go to a rookie quarterback and you got to live through Josh Allen rookie pains, which there were a lot. I mean, there were some highs like that, but there were some lows. And then all of a sudden you have the 2019 season be the one that it is. And it was Thanksgiving week, I want to say. Maybe it was right before. It would be before, because obviously
Sunday before the Cowboys game. That was a great week.
Yeah, but it was actually, ironically enough, too, the last home game win of that regular season. This is the last home win of the season in general, beating the Broncos, going 8-3, dominating that game. And you're like, holy shit, this team's going to make the playoffs with Josh Allen at quarterback. And we're going to be back in the dance. That's another cool moment there, because it's really kind of, in my opinion, the true stamp right before the real stamp that was that Thanksgiving game against the Cowboys, where you're like, we have a team. Or at least a guy in Josh Allen that's another one to shout out to that. I mean, there's so many that, of course, someone like myself would not be able to remember, recognize, whatever it is, even yourself. The fun part of this stadium is how historic it is and how deep those memories go. That's what makes watching some of these farewell videos, also for someone like myself. I do love history and things like that. And you hear from these guys who walked in the stadium for the first time. I'm going to give one more shout out to, I think one of the coolest things that came out of the Bills posted video was one of the stadium staffers talking about a no-name guy in the context of Bills history, a one-year player for this team. In that video, he talks about how he was passing through. He wanted to stop at the stadium. He asked if a staffer could walk him onto the field because that's a field he played on once. And he was only a Bill for one season, and it was the inaugural season. And he returned a 101-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. And he walked this staffer down the field, describing that exact moment to him. And that things like that definitely tug at the heartstrings. And that shows the level of care and love and appreciation that people have in the history of anything. And it's moments like that I look forward to hearing as, we continue through to Sunday. And even I'm sure we'll hear about stuff beyond Sunday, because of course there's going to be a moment in time. The sadness of this all is there will be a moment in time where they're tearing this thing down.
Yeah.
And that's when you're truly going to hear some of those one-of-one stories and those special moments of this stadium that deserve to be talked about, shared, and everything like that. I, as someone that, of course, is a fan of team, and I'm sure you as well, we very much look forward to hearing about and listening to as the stadium is closed out and we move into the new one.
Speaking of Sunday, the Bills have a final game at the stadium against the New York Jets. I will be live at halftime, hopefully talking about whatever the score is, a game that Josh Allen has not played much in. We will then have our Bills Chat post-game show, which will almost certainly, barring something catastrophic happening injury-wise, be focused on the Bills' playoff opponent. Luka and I have not talked about it yet, but the good news is, barring major upsets, we will know the Bills' playoff opponent before the Sunday night game kicks off, so we don't have to wait for that game to get over with, which helps our sleep schedule. And we'll have that posted Monday morning, and then next week, Wednesday night, playoff preview show.
Hell yeah.
Luka, I'll talk to you next year.
Typical joke.
For Luka, I am Josh McCarty. We'll talk to you next week on Bills Chat Live.